I smashed my players at training. My trainings were harder than any game they'd ever played. The games were easy. They became mentally tough, resilient, and they were tough nuts. I set protocols, if you like, or standards, which were, I suppose, they were non-negotiable. I wanted tough nuts that were mentally and physically really tough, and that was a big key for us. But Jonah used to always love coming back into the Sevens team. He loved the culture. He loved the hard work. If I was coaching your All Black Sevens team now, I'd probably be up for the Players Association.
Welcome to Coaching Culture, the podcast about cultivating culture and leadership. I'm Ben Herring, and I've been loving this side of the game for bloody ages. Today's guest is Gordon Tietjens. Now, Gordon is the king of Sevens rugby, one of the sport's founding fathers, really. 22 years with the All Black Sevens, winning pretty much everything, and coaching icons like Cullen and Jonah Lomu in a golden era for All Black rugby. Gordon has been a driving force for the global rise of Sevens to become the popular Olympic sport it is today. He has also coached the Samoan Sevens and the Bay of Plenty team in the 15s format of the game in his home region. He is an IRB Hall of Fame member and has received a New Zealand Order of the Merit for services to the sport. Sir Gordon Tietjens, welcome to the Coaching Culture podcast.
Cheers, Ben. Thanks very much.
Great to have you. We'll kick off with the first question, which is, how do you define culture?
It's an important big word, isn't it, really? And I always remember when I took over the team and announced as a Sevens coach in 1994, and the very first thing I needed to create a culture. And I based that culture on traditional values: honesty, respect, humility, discipline, leadership. And because what are the qualities that create that culture? And I've always been, culture, you need team players. To have the culture that you want, you need team players. Together, everyone achieves more. I've always been for that. Another quality is unity, and unity is family. And that is also defines culture. And I say that because as a coach, I smashed my players at training. I worked particularly hard. My trainings were harder than any game they'd ever played. The games were easy. But believe it or not, the harder you work, the more that unifies the players. They become very, very close. The third one is passion, being passionate for whom you represent, and what the jersey really means to you. And in the All Black Sevens environment, that jersey was everything to make that team. And work tremendously hard to get in that side and be selected. And the last quality too is around team discipline. And I say that in a sense that I broke it into two areas, one around nutrition. I saw the value in nutrition, certainly, and I would never compromise as a coach what that nutrition was and what you shouldn't be eating. And also the other side of that, you needed to be, as an athlete, you needed to be self-motivated. You need to be an athlete that could work unsupervised and work particularly hard. So if you look at all those qualities, the team, the passion, the unity, and the discipline, if you put all those together, that creates the culture, in my view, which is second to none, and a culture certainly in the All Black Sevens environment that you have to have within your team. And we had a family culture. I remember Jonah used to always love coming back into the Sevens team. He was only in it for 3 years, 94, 95, and 96. But he loved the culture. He loved the hard work. He always wanted to do extras. He was always a little bit behind in terms of the levels that he needed to be at, but he worked tremendously hard. He always looked for extras. He'd be going after training to do some extras on the rowing machine, etc. Because that defined us at that time. Was we were a team full of hard workers, guys that were prepared to do everything to jersey.
I love that phrase, mate. The harder you work, the closer you become. Was it?
Yeah, it was, mate. The guys afterwards, they'd dread some of the trainings, and they were, because you're attacking them physically, but it was the mental side. It built them mentally. They became mentally tough, resilient, and they were tough nuts. When the Sevens team, in terms of selection, I'm a coach that selects on character, because if you find someone with the character, they're very, very coachable. And that, to me, is the real key. I won tournaments around the world, Ben, not with the best players, because I couldn't have the best players. from All Blacks to the New Zealand Maoris to Super Rugby to the New Zealand Colts. I had to go outside of all of those teams to find my players. So you go and find a player like Craig de Goldie. Who's Craig de Goldie from the West Coast? But he was a guy that rolled his sleeves up, that emptied the tank for you, that got out and had the character and would sweat everything to wear that jersey. And that's the type of players that I'd go out and find. And you had to. Because team selection around the sevens and conditioning, I wanted tough nuts that were mentally and physically really tough. And that was a big key for us.
Well, when you're talking about that character, what specifically are you looking for? And can you see?
It's something that when you interview someone for a position, if someone's applying for a role, if someone's coming into your environment, you can sense very, very quickly in the first 15 minutes of an interview whether the player's got what you want. He's the right guy. He's the player that's going to roll his sleeves up.
What sort of stuff is he saying or she saying?
Right. Yeah, it's a good question. You get trust in what he's saying. You've done your homework, mind you. You've done your homework on that particular individual, that athlete, long before you're even sitting in front of you. You've gone out and you've talked to people about it. Has he got the work ethic that you need? Has he got the character? The character is someone that's down to earth, someone that's going to get out and prepared to do everything to be selected in that team to travel to wherever.
Yeah, and that becomes quite obvious when you're having a 15-minute chat to someone if they're a genuine down to earth person or not.
Yeah, having the hunger, and it is like I would always look at someone like Dave Rennie as an example. I looked at the players that he used to select. He used to pick players that just rolled their sleeves up. He won 2 Super Rugby titles with players that we hadn't even heard of. He would beat the Fiji Crusaders, And you get an understanding then. I remember he said to me one day, he said, I'm going to battle to select Liam Meston. This is when I coached the All Black Sevens team. As good as he is, but he changed Liam's game, his whole game in the Chiefs. And Liam, all of a sudden, rather than being just a ball player, he was in there cleaning out rucks. He changed his whole game to a sense that then Liam went on to become a very, very good All Black as well. And because he was a guy that selected players that were prepared to do the hard yards. And I had a similar philosophy in the sevens environment, mate. I went out to find players that people had never heard of, but they were prepared to work incredibly hard just to make that team, And they were the guys that won me tournaments. Honestly, as I said before, I won tournaments not with the best players, but I had the best teams. And an important aspect of that was having a leader that was prepared to lead also from the front. And I had someone like Eric Rush for 13 years. When you got a guy like Eric Rush who's still at 39 years of age, still playing in the All Black Sevens team, that was quite incredible. And still hitting the 13s, 14s on a big test.
Yeah.
But he bought into what I wanted as a coach, what I wasn't prepared to compromise over, around nutrition, around food, around work ethic, and training. And I wouldn't compromise fitness levels. That was another thing. I wasn't prepared to select players if they weren't prepared to do the.
Yeah, you certainly got a reputation for that. Everyone knew going into the sevens camps that's what you were signing up for.
Yeah, I just wouldn't compromise. I wanted to reward players that were prepared to work out.
How did you get guys that intrinsically might not have been that motivated to actually get motivated? Was it the power of the group or was it the power of you?
It's funny because I had in one of our training camps, you get these new youngsters that come into your training camps. And on a Saturday night after our first day of training, I had a parent turn up to come to pick up his son. And it was Anthony Tuatabaki's dad. He wanted to go home. It wasn't him, he was new, he was young, he was only 18 or 19. He came into the environment and he was an incredibly talented player. But he'd never been pushed in one of our camps. And because I explained and sat down with his dad and I said, listen, I said, your son has got all the talent in the world. The worst thing he could do is to leave this camp. And I convinced him to stay, and he went on to play a number of games, went on to win a Commonwealth Games gold medal in Manchester as well, in 2002, but he would acknowledge that he became a better rugby player because of that. He got to levels that he probably never believed he could ever get to, and they were incredibly, for Anthony Tuatavake to hit a 13, 14 in a beat test was unheard of.
Yeah. Well, mate, I actually coached him in Japan like a long time afterwards, and his attitude to work hard was phenomenal. So you certainly put something in him early, which he had a phenomenal career around the world, and now is back coaching a policeman, I believe, in New Zealand.
Yeah. I mean, you've got to sell it to them in some ways, but they see the benefits. At training, they might have been hating it, and they're dreading it, and they get through the training, and in the showers, the music's on, and they're happy because they've done they've done some hard work, and it's and that was one of the real keys. The way that it basically brought the players into that, as I said before, that family atmosphere. We're there for each other. We're going to play for each other. We're going to work for each other. And when you're up on whether you're receiving an award, whether that might be a trophy at the end of a tournament, it's just not on that particular day. It's all the work that's done beforehand. When you reflect back, pre-season, during the season, because all our hard yards were done before we left the country. Everything when we got into whatever country we were going to was all about technical, and tactical was quite easy, because I wanted them primed for the tournament. But in New Zealand, we'd replicate tournaments and we'd train back to back. If it was a 3-day tournament, we hit ourselves hard for 3 days. If it was a 2-day tournament, we hit ourselves hard for 2 days. You just didn't know what was coming. But what I did, but I mean that to me was the secret and the key there.
Did you, when you talk about selling this concept, like I assume that's a big part of it, because if you don't sell it, it could obviously go poisonous, right? Like if you're driving people this hard. So how did you sell the need to do this?
All I heard about was how hard players trained, players vomiting at training and stuff like. Some of it was blown out of proportion, but honestly, when they got an understanding, it was pretty hard for a 15-a-side player to immediately get sevens condition. That takes a while. The load is incredible. So therefore, I was mindful around that as well. So I would put that responsibility with my trainer to slowly get him up to the levels that he needs to get to. Because he won't be any good if he doesn't get to those levels. And it was hard work. But once they got there, all of a sudden they've got this work ethic. It's easy. Whether they're doing 60-40s or whether they're doing repeated speed, it became easy. And going into the 15th game, it was a dream.
Yeah. When the players, I certainly remember when players came back into the super squads, they were phenomenal because they were so fit.
Okay, I suppose the best thing to sell it, if you looked at players, look at the players. I think it was about 46 players came through my sevens team to go on to become 43 All Blacks. And look at the Jonahs, look at the Christian Cullens, the Joe Rukafokos, the Bruce Rehunters. There's some wonderful players that have come through the sevens team, and look at a young guy like Amosio Balance Royale, a youngster who was 17, played against us in a Fijian Invitational, New Zealand Invitational Fijians, based in Auckland, played us before we went away on a tour, and this guy just tore us apart. And he was 17. Who is this guy? He's Amosio Balance Royale. Well, he went on to win 3 Commonwealth Game gold medals. And he was the Waisani Sarevi of New Zealand sevens. Incredible player. And straight away with Amosio, it was everything to him. It was his family, because in Fiji, because that's their life, sevens rugby, and here he is playing for the All Black sevens team. But he was a tremendous player, and the rewards he got, he'd never been ever as fit in his life. I remember it was the Sacred Heart School. I rang the sports director at Sacred Heart College as the All Black sevens coach and said, listen, you've got a youngster there I'd like to have a look at. I'd like you to test him today for me, please. Could you put him through a big test? Because I'm seriously looking at him while he's still at school.
Yeah, is that right?
Ian Meston, same thing, still at school, 17. Same thing applied. Craig Newby, another one, still at school. And I wanted some true figures and where they were prepared to work. And I got the figures back, and sure enough, and they all went on to come and make the All Black Sevens team.
There's something pretty powerful about that physical hard work equating to good character and longevity in the game.
Yeah. Like there were two players in my team that I had, and as a coach, one of them was Rico Ioane, and one was Akira Ioane, two brothers that got selected on my All Black Sevens team. And I was thinking, how am I going to get the best out of these two particular players? Both talented, very talented athletes. Rico was 17, Akira was 19. So we met their mum and dad at the Olympic Cafe in Auckland. And I spent probably an hour and a half with them learning about their two boys, all the good things that they excel at, but also the areas where they needed work on. And you've got two athletes that were chalk and cheese. Rico used to have to get Akira out of bed just to go to training, but believe it or not, it was incredible how they both, as brothers, that hour and a half I spent with their mum and dad was building trust. They trusted me as a coach that their boys would be looked after traveling around the world, and those kids would do anything for you. And that was a real key, was building trust with the people that matter in these kids' lives. They were so young. And that was a real key for me. And they knew that. They knew I had this meeting with them, and they were prepared to work hard. I remember ringing Sandra, Akira's mum, one day and said, "Sandra, I'm ringing you about Akira." And the first thing Sandra said, what's he done now? Yeah. But I was actually ringing her to say that he's training at the house down. He's incredible at the moment. And that was one of the real keys, is that point of communication you need as a coach. And also, and how can they get the best out of some of the players, and some of these Pacific Island players, especially, meet their families and build that trust. And that to me was one of the real keys, and that I thought anyway at that particular time that I did well.
Is that what you have to do, Gordon? Because obviously you're known for your high standards and you push people really hard, but do you actually have to have the other side as well, that showing real care to be able to push people hard?
That's probably the biggest quality, Ben, it's about you care about the people that you're working with. You care about the athletes. That caring aspect is everything. Like we all have challenges and battles in our lives, but that caring aspect, not only in sport and business, is so important.
Yeah. It's massive, isn't it? Because it's kind of that understanding of, if you can understand why someone's pushing you and that they care about you while they're doing it, then you're all in, aren't you?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, I'll let you into something. When I was coaching, I used a traffic light analogy when I was assessing players, and I wanted to coach greens. That was the real key for me, coaching greens. And there's lots of yellows out there, and you don't want any reds, right? So when I was coaching the All Black Sevens team, I had 80% greens.
What does green mean?
Green is all about intent. Green is about work unsupervised, train the house down. Just the ideal athlete. Don't even have to motivate them. They're going to go out and empty the tank for you. Okay, yellows. What is a yellow? A yellow's got all the talent in the world, but they just do enough. So you never know what you're going to get out of a yellow. They're a minefield to coach. And then you've got reds. Well, reds create division within your team. They just won't front up, or they don't turn up. And they, and of course, if they take all our time as coaches, if you've got a read in your team, they do. And because they, as I said, they create division, and then you're not going to ever have the culture that you so desire within your group or within your team. The key around that is when I was coaching the All Blacks, I had 80% green, but I was still working with 20% yellows. But the key is I had no reds. And if you mention someone's name, if I said to you, Richie McCaw, you straight away, you think green. Sonny Bill Williams, most professional athlete I ever coached, green. But the moment you have to think what someone is, they're yellow. So if you go, I said Adi Savia, you think green. Well, I said, Julian Severe, I'd probably go yellow, but it could be a green. So my job was to turn those yellows into greens, and because I worked with all these athletes, and that was the real key and it's funny enough, the yellows know who they are. They're the ones that don't quite hit the line, the ones that, are fractionally late and because coaching it, if you've got more yellows in your team than greens, your performances are inconsistent. You're all over the show. But the key with my team having 80%, your consistency rate was right up there. And that's why we had a great success rate, winning tournaments and so. And it's funny, and as I said, the yellows know who they are. So some yellows, can they turn into greens? Sure they can. And you've got to be open with them as a coach, and they know why they're a yellow. And because I tell you, they are a minefield to coach a yellow, because you never know what you're going to get out of a yellow. He might give you the performance of a green one day, outstanding. But then the time when you really need them, you don't turn up.
So are you saying your focus is mainly the yellows, but like they're the guys you're
No, having greens, mate, my goal was obviously to have all greens within my side, but you're always going to be working with yellows, particularly youngsters coming into your environment. They come in with all the skill sets, because they had a lot of skills in New Zealand, a lot of talented athletes. They're going to make the teams regardless, because they've got all the skill sets, but they've never pushed themselves hard. And in the sevens environment, the conditioning levels you need to get to are massive. So I can't afford to carry anyone that's not prepared to be a green.
Well, was the physical side that you pushed them on your methodology from getting yellows to greens? That was the vehicle, like the actual working hard aspect?
Yeah, working hard. You get to, I use an example, right? And if we had 20 athletes, Ben, and we were going to the gymnasium tomorrow morning, we've got a 7 o'clock in the morning workout. So I got my 20 athletes and we all went down to the gym. And there's 20 treadmills, there's 20 rowing machines, and there's 20 bikes. I could walk in blindfolded into that gymnasium and tell you exactly what athlete would be on what. I could tell you right now, the guys that won me tournaments will be on the rowing machines and the treadmills. The cruisers, the yellows, will be on the bikes. And it's not to say you can't work hard on a bike, because you can. But it was the easiest option and the best option.
Well, that's a good test.
Tell you, and I wouldn't be wrong, mate. I could walk in, I'd be blown away if I saw one of my yellows on the rower, pounding on the rower, honestly.
Yeah.
And I'd say, mate, he's getting to where I need him to get to.
That is an awesome test. I'd imagine, did you up? Because
mate, I know, I could tell you, I go through my whole team. I know that Eric Rushes and all these guys will be on the tread or the rower. Oh, yeah, hell yeah. I mean, yeah, but also knew the guys that would be on the bikes.
What did you do with the reds? Did you just remove them?
I wouldn't want to mention those, but I did have what you've got to manage the reds, because they take all your time, right? In the sport of cricket, I'll use the sport of cricket. Jesse Ryder was probably a red. And you see had all the talent in the world, mate. And so trouble followed him, because that's what happens. But can you turn a red and become a yellow to become a green, mate? You're doing an awesome job, and you're an unbelievable coach if you can. And it's not saying you can't. It's never such a word. But honestly, I believe, and you will at odd times, you will have a red, but they create division. They take all your time, and you have to manage them out. This is not only in sport. This is in business as well, because they're infectious. Because when you've got reds in your team, you lose good staff.
Oh, why is that?
Because in business, if you've got a red, you're operating with red, you're not going to ever have that satisfactory culture that you want within your team. And people leave. You lose good people because of the unhappiness, and the environment's toxic because of you're carrying reds. I spoke at a conference once, and a big manager came out to me and he said, "No wonder we're going now, because I've got reds working for me." When I talked about the analogy, and you lose good people. So you have to manage them out. You've got to, because they take all our time. And this is in sport as well. So, and there'd be the odd red, honestly, that, and because, when I used that philosophy before around that analogy before about the bikes and the rowing machine and the treadmills, well, the red wouldn't have turned up. At least the yellows have got on the bikes, so, but, it's a pretty good analogy, but honestly, reds, you'd never get a red in your bikes. In your view, remember, these are, in your view or my view, I assess, and you're not far off, like when I look at it, and like I said before, like Sonny Bill Williams was a green class in everything that he did as an athlete. Richard McCaw, no question. All those guys, all those in our environment, in my sevens teams, the Eric Rushes, the Dallas Seymours, DJ Forbes, the tough IIO, all these guys were greens. No greens, man. They're your leaders. They're the guys. Carlton Anna was another one. Was a great leader. But they were greens. And they need to be greens.
I think it's a really lovely little concept for all coaches, Gordon, around that when you ask, and if there's a pause, they're yellow. And I think it's a good recruitment tool as well. When you're ringing a coach, if you're looking for a player and you say, what's he like as a person? And if they go, oh, fantastic. Yeah, he's straight in the green pile. But if there's a pause, you can almost say no more.
Yeah.
I get it.
Correct. It's like when you hesitate to buy a property, isn't it? If you hear, you don't buy it.
Yeah, that's right.
But if you want to jump in, you buy it. And it's the same thing, the moment you've got to think, he's a yellow. If he's automatic, he's either going to be a green or a red. Because if he was a red, you'd say red straight away anyway. But honestly, it's a really, in my view, it's quite a good analogy in which to how you assess your individuals within your team.
Love it, mate. Now, when you're talking, you sort of said that your part of your mission is to change oranges or yellows into greens. But, mate, how many players have shaped you as a coach? Like, have you had guys that you care to mention that they have actually shaped you? And what do they teach you as a coach?
Yeah. Rick Rush, in my view, shaped me as a coach in a long way. It's about building relationships with your team leader, in which I felt he was someone that believed in what I believed that was going to be successful. He shaped me in a lot of ways because the trust factor was there between both. We built a fantastic relationship. And he was very, very honest, brutally honest around assessments, because he'd also come into my selection meetings as well when we talked about selection and whatever as well.
Oh, he actually was almost like a fourth coach in a lot of ways?
In a lot of ways, yeah.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, he was. Because, 13 years ago, when I first went in there, I was blown away. Here I am in my first year in 94, coaching Eric Rush and Dallas Seymour. They were real stars in their own right then, coming through the sevens team. Rushy went on to stay 13 years with me. Incredible, but we had a great relationship, a coach-player relationship. He knew that I never compromised as a coach. He knew, he still worked his butt off to still be in that team, to prove that as old as he was, he deserved to be in the team. And that's why he was good. Christian Cullen probably shaped me, and Christian and Jonah in some ways. They're probably, as a coach, they were incredible athletes. People quite often ask me who are the two best sevens players you've ever coached, and in terms of what they achieved in the sevens field, I don't think Jonah ever lost in the All Black sevens jersey. He won 3 Hong Kongs, 94, 95 and 96. He won a World Cup and a Commonwealth Games in 98 at Kuala Lumpur. And Cully, he turned up in 95, played the first game for me in Hong Kong against Chinese Taipei, scored the very first try, and that was his last game for the tournament. And then the next year in 96, he was a star and he scored 18 tries, and just incredible athlete. And then we went on to see what he also achieved in the All Blacks, and as probably the best ever fullback we've ever had.
I love that, mate. Did your coaching evolve through these guys, like from where it started to what have you learned along the way with some of these guys?
Well, I felt working with, well, yeah, I mean, I didn't know Christian was going to be as good as what he was when he came in, and he was superbly talented, and because I just saw this guy playing for Manawatu at the Sevens in Palmerston North, and shit, who's this guy? And he comes into camp, and and Jonah was likewise. Jonah was 18, playing for counties at that time, even though he had a background coming through the schools, as an number 8, but he ended up playing on the wing for us. And then he obviously went out to the wing for the All Blacks as well. But they probably shaped me as because our sevens team was very, very successful in those days. In 94, and we won the 3 Hong Kongs in our first year. And that was the only tournament there used to be, effectively, I suppose, that had any mana or, which was a high profile tournament. So from that, I suppose, with the success we had with these guys that were just sort of superstars in their own rights coming through, they probably, I suppose, they got a lot of recognition because of that. Talent spotted them, but in some ways they've probably been spotted at age groups coming through in that as well. But because they're on the world stage and all of a sudden they became superstars. And, and obviously someone like Jonah, of course, was just what he could do on the rugby field. I remember even now, I remember in the World Cup, our first ever World Cup that we won, I think it was in 2001, I think, or 2000 or something in South America. And we lost Rushy. We lost Eric Rush as our leader, broke his leg playing England in a quarter or semi-final. We went on to play Argentina in the semi the next day, and we'd lost Rushy, and Rushy had to go back to New Zealand. Jonah single-handedly, in my view, basically won us that World Cup in the final against Australia. Just ran over Brendan Williams like you would never, just like you used to see Steve Catt run over by Jonah. Well, he did this to this youngster, Brendan Williams, for Australia. They're memories that you never forget, and it was incredible. Because in those days, Ben, when any player left your team, and this Jonah Rushy was having to go back to New Zealand to have an urgent operation at Middlemore Hospital in Auckland on his leg, a player has to perform a haka on his own. He probably did it through teams that you were in when they left to get in the taxi to go to the airport. And I always remember we were all waiting in the lounge, and Rushy comes into the lounge in the reception area of our hotel in South America in a wheelchair. And I thought, how's he going to perform his haka, And then just out of nowhere, mate, Jonah just started this haka. Like one of the most emotional hakas, stirring, motivational haka I've ever seen. That was my team talk for our game against Argentina 2.5 hours later. It was incredible. And that was the beauty, and that was our culture. That was who we were. The guys would just bleed for each other in our sevens environment, not just because we're the New Zealand team. The entire squad of 20, I was allowed to contact 20 there. Even if they were there, that was just how we were, And this is Jonah, the superstar, just led it, and mate, it was incredible in what he did. And then to go out and perform like he did was even just mind-boggling, really.
Yeah. Well, yeah. What a fantastic guy he was, right? Just on so many levels.
And who knew, Jonah obviously had some health issues, even when he was in the sevens team, but he didn't come and say, can I have today off training because I'm not feeling as well or haven't got the energy levels. He just did it. He was just, and he wanted extras after training. He'd come up, he'd be at the White Puna in Auckland, and he'd come up and say, can we do some extras? So wherever you after the gym, he'd get on the rower, and I just supervised him while he did some extras.
How did you manage that condition? Did you know about it enough to manage it?
No, never knew. No. At that time, no.
Is that right?
Never had any idea. No. But he would never tell anyone. Jonah was someone that would give you the shirt off his back. I remember someone going up and saying, I love your stereo, because he'd have these beautiful sort of stereos, And he'd give the guy who ever said, I love your stereo, give it to him, mate. He was just a giving person and a great, great athlete to be involved with.
Now, it's just a couple of phrases you've said a couple of times on this chat so far, mate. You just said things like, Eric Rush knew I wouldn't compromise as a coach. Have you had to compromise a few things as a coach?
I set protocols, if you like, or standards, and which were, I suppose, they were non-negotiable, I suppose, within our environment. And that was certainly around nutrition and getting to the levels of conditioning you needed to be at. Otherwise, I wouldn't select you. Probably something similar to the Northern Tail Ro's been going through just recently as well in New Zealand. With New Zealand netball.
Yeah.
She set standards. She's a pretty similar coach to what I was. And of course, she will not select players if they don't meet the levels that they need to be at. And I was exactly the same. I could not select someone. And he had to be 100%. Yeah, that was just one of my non-negotiables and something that I never, and of course, it was what was really good about Rushy. I can't believe you're not going to select him. Said Rushy, he's not hitting the numbers, mate. He's done nothing when he's gone back. And see, in between our tournaments, we were never centrally located like they are now.
That's right.
No, they all live in Mount Wanganui. So we come in from wherever, Invercargill, wherever they lived, they came in from wherever, and we'd assemble in the mount, come into the mount, we'd have a little light lunch, and then we off to go to the action centre or whatever centre it is in Tauranga, and we start off with straight away speed tests.
Yeah.
Right, over 10 and over 40. Then we'd have a decrement phosphate test, which is 10 40 metres sprints for 30-second recoveries, electronically timed individually. And then we go from that to the beep test. We do a beep test, and then we do a shuttle test, and then we go and train. And that was all in the one afternoon. After that, some of them had flown in. And because we were so conditioned to that, guys were prepared for that. Never, very rarely lost a player in condition testing, ever. We just were so well conditioned, and guys had done the work back in their province before coming into camp. And that was the real key, and I wasn't prepared to compromise anything around that.
Mm.
The moment you compromise, you display a weakness.
Ooh, do you reckon?
It doesn't send a good message to the other players. We set standards, minimum 30 in beat tests.
Or you have a hard standard, like a number, like a stat.
Yeah.
If you're not making it, you can't make the
Yeah,
team.
and you get the odd player that as soon as you hit 30, 31 stop, you get the other player would go on to get his mate to push out his best. Yeah. So, yeah, but, some players are just quite content just to do enough, knowing there's a decrement phosphate test or knowing there's something else afterwards than that.
Do you reckon, Gordon, that so obviously we're talking a little time ago, do you reckon the modern athlete is the same and would respond the same to this manner of coaching, or do you reckon there needs to be an adjustment?
So if I was coaching the All Blacks Sevens team now, I'd probably be up for the Players Association. And I say it because now you're appointing leadership groups, and you've got to sell it to them. But I've built my success around and it was proven that in the game of sevens, conditioning is a massively important area that you need to excel at. And honestly, now, why is Spain so good now? They're so fit, mate. They've got teams now that I think there's too much guided around science. Once the players have done a certain amount they get a GPS on them, they've done a certain number, then that's it, cut. If I felt you're not fit enough, I should have the right to go and say that you need to do. I got a Complacency trainer, and I want him to train in the afternoons for the next 2, because he needs to be at this level of fitness, and he's not there yet. If he wants to be selected, I should have the right to do that. But now everything's guided by player wellness and basically player welfare, I suppose. And as I said, I'll be up before the Players Association, because some players may refuse, like the netballers, they refuse to be part of it.
It's fascinating change, yeah. So are you saying you reckon your style just wouldn't fit in back then, wouldn't fit in today's athletic?
I think a lot of it comes down to selection. when you select your athletes, you select players that are going to be prepared to work for you. In the sevens environment, I wouldn't select any guy that I felt and I didn't have the confidence in that he was an athlete that was prepared to work hard, regardless of his skill sets. Honestly, because now you've got a different athlete these days. You've got an athlete to say, why do we have to do that? You know?
That's different, isn't it?
It is so different. Where in the past, and for the Chinese woman was so good, and I enjoyed coaching them. Just the fact is, people have got to give us the credit that we've put a lot of thought into why we're having these certain sort of trainings at this certain sort of intensity. You know, there's a reason behind it. There's a reason why I replicate we're going to have 2 real tough days, because that's what it's going to take to win the tournament in 10 days' time. Because we're going to have 2 tough days there. And look at our draw and our draw. Every tournament, to me, every game was a final, in my view. Every game was a final, and we could never take anyone for granted. It was just, the sevens game is a fickle game. On any given day, any team can beat any team. So we had to get up, for our first game against Chile, as if it was Fiji, as if it was one of the bigger names. And that's what we ground that into our players. So I never took any team for granted. We went out to smash them, and that was just our attitude. And we had the guys to do that.
Yeah, uncompromising, Titch.
Yeah, we had to, yeah.
Well, we're talking about that Chinese. I think it's really cool that you're running the high performance for China. When you're talking about that, what is your approach to them in particular, and building an environment and a culture around, an up and coming, hopefully a force in sevens rugby?
Yeah, I mean, it was a real an eye opener for me when I first went over there. But once I got an understanding and I saw in China, I was really impressed with all the facilities they have, the grounds, the training facilities, the gyms, and even more so the athletes. And the more so the athletes and their skill sets and how hard they're prepared to work. And it was incredible and great. As I said, probably one of the most enjoyable times of my coaching career was working with the Chinese women, because they work incredibly hard, no questions, and they'll keep working. I actually had to plead with the coaches over there to give them a day off, a couple of days off.
What?
Here I am,
pleading
with the coaches to give them a couple of days, because, and trying to tell the coaches that a travel day is not a day off, and when you're flying into another country. So one time I actually convinced them to give them 3 days off. But within those 3 days, they still had a 2-hour video session every day. So from the mental side, but they had, because you could run them into the ground. And I even understood that, because these girls work tremendously hard, but they needed to also understand the body will break. I can understand that.
Why do you think the ladies there, the Chinese woman, had that mentality? Any background to that?
It's just the China mentality amongst all their athletes. Over on another field, over from us, when I was over in China, there was a football team training, and there were some goalies that were having goalkeeping practice. And if you'd seen them having to get up and dive, they had one guy just hammering kicks at this guy, and it was like doing down-ups. He's having to stop about 20, 30 guys. Then the next volley, it was this turn, and it was incredible. They work incredibly hard. Just their training ethos or their ethic is incredible, mate. I think they're all like that. I was in the Olympic Training Centre at Beijing as well. And you see the effort of some of the athletes. It's incredible in China.
Yeah.
That's just their mindset. That's how they work. They work particularly hard.
And did that resonate with your style naturally?
Of course, no question. I have no trouble whatsoever but working with a Chinese girls team. Even the men are massively talented. There's just too much politics in China rugby, unfortunately, where the provinces have the power over the athlete. So they can actually pull you away from playing for your country just to play for the province.
Do you think there's, just on that sort of concept, that do you think a coach has a type of team which suits them better, whether your style suits some teams better than others?
Yeah.
or the history or the culture of that place or that team?
They were a team that would, I mean, they'd have trials after trials after trials to get the selection right, honestly. And they also went through that process of fitness and everything as well. And they get it right, eh? I'm a full belief in their systems. And I mean, I added a few things in there when I was there, and they wanted to make change in some certain areas, which was fantastic. And I thought it was great when you saw the results, delivering the right results on the training park to win all the Challenger Series tournaments and then go to the Olympics and then go to, which was fantastic. And they can only get better. But as I said, the sad thing is the politics gets involved over there around selection, which can weaken your team dramatically.
Well, obviously the Chinese, they won all the Challenger Series stuff undefeated. And likewise with the All Blacks that you had, a lot of victories. How do you get through is there a complacency that comes up in teams that you coach? And if so, like how do you get on top of that sort of concept?
We were, as I said, the game of sevens is very fickle, but we treated every game as a final. Every game was treated as a final, and you never look too far ahead. And that's exactly how you got to look at it. It's no different to a tennis draw. What's in front of you? Hey, you just take what's in front of you. And you gotta, they have the utmost respect for us. Remember that all those teams coming in to play us have nothing at all to lose. Nothing at all to lose. We're playing the All Blacks. And it's so easy if you drop to their levels, or their so-called levels. So nothing changed for us. Our prep before the game, if we're playing 11 o'clock, we smashed ourselves at 8 o'clock. Nothing changed for us. Everything, we applied ourselves exactly the same way if we're going into a final. Honestly, yeah. We worked incredibly hard, even though it was a lesser known team and we were expected to win. That's the danger when you're expected to win, And so therefore you want 7 guys doing greens that are up for it. And I'd like to think that a lot of our games were won on the first half. It's funny because with coaching now, a lot of it also, a coach is challenged around his replacements at certain times of the game. And if there's a big gap between the players on the bench in terms of ability to the players that are actually on the starting in your starting team, I was very reluctant to make change unless the game was won, in my view.
Or you didn't make much changes to your teams?
Hardly ever. Unless if there were 2 players that were neck and neck, one was playing and one was on the bench, then I'd have no trouble making that change if I needed to.
So you had a bit of a policy.
If the gap was too great between the players, I could not bring off a game breaker if the game was on a knife edge. And that's the real key now. You see it now in some of the games, coaches feel they have to give players a run because getting the end of the game. The game's on a knife edge. Mate, that player could be so important to you. There's no written rule. You have to play them, and in sevens, it's vital, it's huge. And that it's just, that was how I was as a coach. The game had to be won before I'd openly make changes. And particularly you get challenged if the gap is great between in terms of ability for the player that's on the bench to the player that you started. Though I do have a favourite saying in life, whoever plays will do the job. And that's the confidence we have to, as a coach, have to have in whoever comes off the bench. Hey, that's just part of it.
Whoever plays will do the job.
Whoever plays will do the job, yeah. Yeah, that's, you got it.
Well, it's a great confidence booster for players, right? Like to know that
it is.
That's what you think.
Yeah, mate, it is. Yeah, obviously, you have confidence. You've selected them for a reason, Yeah.
Of it, mate. Now, how have you done it, Gordon? How have you stayed in this? Like you're still working with the Chinese team. How have you done this for so long? Like, have you maintained like for 22 years in the All Blacks coaching that? Like, how do you maintain that longevity in the game?
I think I got the most enjoyment out of coaching is when you see players that actually you shape their career as a rugby player. It's where they've started, and all of a sudden you've given them the confidence, especially when you've picked nobody players that no one's ever heard of, no one's ever known, and all of a sudden all of a sudden you've shaped their career as a person. They've got exposed on the national circuit of TV over the world. And to me, that's everything. To me, it was more than winning a tournament. Was saying you've actually been part of their ride, if you like, to where they're at now. And you've built lifelong relationships. Yeah. Even now, I still hear from a few athletes and that, and you run into them and that. It's like they've never left. It's like you still, particularly when you have a reunion. And we had one before they went off to the Olympics in Paris or something like that. I was like, all my old guys that paid for us for years or in one of the changing rooms reminiscing about what happened, how many years ago and what we did and how we got smashed here, and players come up with things that I realised they hadn't done, but they'd been behind my back, so, but the memories that you never forget, and if I can give something into now, sometimes you'll be asked to go and speak, present a jersey or something like that. And it's pretty special. It still sends the old goosebumps thing when you go into a changing room and, these guys are going out. On a couple of occasions, I've presented jerseys to the current All Black Sevens team and had a talk to them only recently. It still gives you a little bit of a buzz being part of them and being there. Yeah, do you miss it? Yeah, to an extent, but you can never go away from it because it's always there for you, and you'll never lose it. And that's something that you can always reflect back on the friendships and what I've got out of Sevens rugby, and it's been massive. It's been a massive part of my life.
Yeah, that's awesome, mate. What advice would you give a young coach who wants to do well in rugby?
Yeah, it's a really, really good question because I just believe in what you're doing. I think I've always said never ever pretend to be someone that you're not. It's always about being you. You're learning off little bits here or whoever, but it's about being you and coaching the way that you feel is the right way to coach. You get a whole lot of guys that come along and give you, what about this, try this, try this. You can take that on board, but you've got to be happy with the selection you've made, with the game plan you've put in place. Now you have lots of coaches which you can sit in meetings and you can discuss that. At my time, it was just me. But I had a great captain, that I could work with. But I said, just believe in what you're doing and you can walk away from that. Well, I gave it my best shot. And that's what we ask, And it's like Roger Federer, right? Every time we went out on a tennis court, he went out to give it his very, very best, right? And I suppose a story that I quite often talk about is in 2008, he played the greatest game of tennis ever against Rafa Nadal in the final of Wimbledon. And Wimbledon's a Grand Slam tournament they all want to win. And why I use this story is because this is what I expect from my athletes. Now, Federer went on to lose that game in 2008. And the interview afterwards, he was shattered, visibly teary on TV. He'd just been beaten in the tournament. He so much wanted to win. And yet he'd won Wimbledon about 4 or 5 times before that. Nadal had beaten Federer. I read an article, which is about 6 or 7 days after that, and it said everything. Nadal won the greatest game of tennis, but Federer gained in defeat. He showed us that losing, although painful, is not necessarily failure. How can it be when you've given it all you have? And that says it all, mate. You can lose and it hurts, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's failure when you've given it all you have. And that to me was a real key, and I've always learned from that. We got beaten for the very first time at the Com Games in Glasgow against South Africa in the final for the gold medal. I went into the holding room afterwards. We got beaten at full time. Holding room afterwards for the medal ceremony. It was like walking into a funeral parlour. My players were shattered. Never been beaten at the Com Games. It's our 4th Com Games. Got the silver medal. But in my view, they'd given 200%. They'd given it everything they had. And then I had to get them up. It was my job to get them up and be proud of getting up on that, and getting a silver medal.
Yeah, man.
And that to me, I've really learned from that. It's about losing, although it hurts, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's failure. How can it be when you've given it all you have?
Yeah, I love that sentiment, mate. I think all coaches should endeavour to to get that into their psyche. Now, Titch, the last question, it's got to that time, it's been a wonderful conversation. Just one more question for you, as the one that we always finish on is, do you have any beliefs about coaching and the culture of coaching that you believe in, that you reckon your peers and contemporaries would disagree with?
Yeah, I saw that, or I thought about it. It was a good question. It's a really good question. That they'd possibly not agree with me? Is that what you're saying? That they would probably disagree with me?
Yeah.
Well, I just don't believe you can compromise on what you believe is right, whether that be a game plan, whether it be a route selection or whatever. But you've got to do it. You've got the role as the head coach. You have the final say. And I believe, I'm certainly, the belief I have is you've got to do it your way, and you make that for you and be confident with the decision you've made. You know, we have coaching panels now. We have coaching teams and selection teams and all that sort of stuff. But I believe as a coach, particularly if you're the head coach, don't compromise what you believe is right.
Where do you think contemporaries would potentially disagree with that statement?
You're going to get, it's in today's world, it's, it's like anything, like, it's funny. You can be the best salesperson in the world and know everything about the product, but the customer don't like you, he's not going to buy off you, right?
Yeah.
You can know nothing about a product, be an awesome person, and everyone will buy off you. And what I look at in terms of coaching, and you've earned and built the respect among, because that's a key that all us coaches have to. We've got to go out and you've got to earn the respect of the players. That to me is key. You've got to earn it. And those guys, they'll climb any mountain for you. They'll do anything for you. So I believe on when you're going in, and when I say conditioning levels across all sports plays a massive part in success. And yeah, sure, I've been known for that, being ruthless around conditioning and that, but you cannot compromise that. I think these days the coach isn't the boss across all areas that he should be. I don't think he's the boss across all areas. He should be. If I believe they need to go out and do some extras, I have the right to say that, but it's not like that now.
It's changing, isn't it? Or changed.
It's changed. It's changed, and that's what I'm saying. And I think, but as a coach, you want to go out on your terms, win or lose. Yeah, whatever that means,
Love it. Gordon Tietjens, what a pleasure it is to have chatted to you today. Hey, if I may, I'd just like to give you my 3 takeaways of some of the key points that I took away from this chat. Number 1, this concept of the harder you work, the closer you become as a team. One of your big statements is you wanted unity in a team, and the way you did it was that concept of work together, stick together. And I just think it's a lovely one to bring that sort of physical nature to like an emotional tie-in as well. And making the hard work a reason for coming together is absolutely sensational. I think a lot of coaches would love hearing that from you. Number 2, I loved this traffic light system where you talked about whether you want about 80% greens, 20% yellows, and ideally no reds. And I love what you said about if you ask if someone what they are like character-wise and you say instantly outstanding, they're in the green. And if you have to pause, they're in the yellow. And I think that's a nice little habit or a little tool that coaches can use to just make a little assessment of their own teams using that traffic light system. And number 3, I loved the value you put on building relationships with your team leader, getting that trust factor, that coach-player relationship, because it does lighten the load of a coach, but it also optimizes the environment. It maximizes what you're doing as a coach when you've got an offsider that's inside the team working with you and doubling down on everything you say. And I think the value of that is absolute gold. And I think it's important, if you haven't got it in a team, you actually work to build a relationship with your team leader. Gordon Tietjens, thank you for joining us today on the Coaching Culture podcast.
Cheers, man. Pleasure.